Hi, I'm Toshio Taki. I'm Chief of Public Affairs at Money Forward. I'm also one of the co-founders of the company. Today, I'm going to speak about the public affairs activity in the company. I believe our public affairs is a very unique trait that defines many of our corporate actions. And also, it also will imagine a lot of our future opportunities in the company. So let me begin. Starting off with some numbers, when we compare many of the modern day financial infrastructure in the finance, there is a huge shortage. So when we think about the penetration of defined contribution pension funds, it's only 18%. The investment population, which tends to be above half in the US, is still at 18%. Cloud-based accounting is only used in 21% of the firms. Internet banking is only penetrated in 24% of the population, and people still make more than 70% of their payments via cash in this country. So what we even imagined at the founding of this company was we might still be living in the 20th century while we already have the tools for this one. And also, we always believe that Money Forward is in a unique place to not just penetrate, but also become an ecosystem surrounding these modern day infrastructures. And of course, not to name that without these infrastructures, Japanese citizens and businesses cannot enjoy or feel this sense of safety that will be needed in the far future when we think about the societal challenges such as the aging and the productivity growth. So why we started this public affairs opportunity was mainly because we wanted to actually change what is needed in Japan. And in Japan, there is a huge theme that if you want to change the society, you just cannot be a simple technology player. We also need to involve and include and transform the traditional part of Japan, since thinking in mind that many of the Japanese businesses are relatively older than what it is in the global scale. And also the population or the demographics is also in the aged arena. So we always think about creating the Japanese level trust. And I think this jargon is very artificial, but Japanese level does not just mean numerically trustful, but also we need to have a lot of emotional involvement, both from the public and the users. So this is the main core reason why we focus on public affairs. The other thing is, because Money Forward's future path heavily relies on the growth of both software as a service and also the fintech industry, we need a lot of deregulation in the field. And this will not involve just one kind of government offices. It will be highly multifaceted, and we need to have a very high exposure to both the political and also the general public. Bearing in mind that there is so many things we need to change in order to change the Japanese society. We always leverage our values towards our public affairs activities. So as we already mentioned, we always have these three core values when we govern our own business. But when we talk about user focus in the world of finance, it is both stereotypically told, and also it is very much intuitively understandable that users are, in many cases, not in the priority zone when it comes to the financial industry. And since many of the industry participants came to acknowledge the word fintech around 5 or 6 years ago, I mean, people were so much both astonished and were also enthusiastic about, let's say, the potentiality of the blockchain technologies, the potentiality of the quantum computing, and many other very cutting edge technologies. But it is always important not to oversell technology in the world of finance, especially when technology is not always tested at the level or maybe the bulletproof level of the financial risk tolerance that in many parts of the regulatory world demands. But it is always important to mention that you really need to think neutral to technology. So in many other financial regulators around the world, it tends to be the jargon that technological neutrality in the world of financial regulation is very important. But this is a very, very difficult thing to communicate. But I think Manifold is in a very unique position since we have so many both individuals and businesses actually becoming users and benefiters of the modern day technologies. We can communicate how the general public can gradually penetrate the new kind of technologies. And lastly, fairness is so important. This is not just important because we might be acknowledged as a disruptor in the financial world, which we never wish to be. But technology always sounds like a disrupting image in some cases. So as I mentioned, it is very much important to have an involving and inclusive story surrounding both technology and innovation when it comes to the world of finance. We, as a company, have a very large audience of how we deliver our service. I'm thinking about the Manifold business companies. It mainly faces both the SMEs and also the larger companies in order to improve their productivity in their business. In the home domain, we face 12 million users of retail people who are very much also concerned about how their money will look like in the super aging society, and also to preserve as much retirement assets as possible, thinking in mind about the aging demographics in Japan. And of course, there are so many security-related issues surrounding financial institutions, especially in the age of anti-money laundering and also bringing in new innovations in the traditional financial world. And so there are so many things related to finance and SaaS, but we tend to prioritize some key aspects that we can, in the future, leverage on. So let me name just a few from this chart where we have been conducting a lot of studies related to the super aging society. So imagining a user, 95-year-old lady who still wishes to use Manifold. I mean, there will be so many challenges surrounding these usage scenarios, but there are some policy procedures that are actually helping the aging society to benefit from the usage of new technologies. Another theme would be the promotion of electronic invoice. And starting from 2023, Japan will be at last introducing invoicing in the consumption tax regime. This will not be an easy task since almost most of the Japanese businesses will have to adopt a new way of back office administration. So we prioritize many of the SaaS and fintech related issues, and then we actually struggle to both trying to mention how these technologies will be deployed in the society, and also how that will involve the entire population, not just for the people who just acknowledge the new technology, but for the general public who will, on a macro level, benefit from new technologies. I would like to give just one case study about the advocacies of banking APIs. So Manifold's probably largest accomplishment in the world of public affairs is the advocacy of banking APIs. Back in 2015, when it was like 3 or 4 years when we went into our business, most of the cloud accounting and personal finance app used to ask the users to give their IDs and passwords inside their own services. But there were so many security-related concerns around this issue. And also there was a global trend to divide the infrastructure side of the financial business with the innovative applications. And this was always mentioned with a jargon called open banking. And open banking tends to be nowadays one of the core themes in any country when it comes to financial innovation. Money Forward has been centric in both adopting the usage of banking APIs and also the usage and standardization of how these banking APIs could be developed. And we were not only just the users of banking APIs, but also the advocates who talk and communicate with the banking industry in how we can together create value towards our future. So these kind of activities are very much representative case, which describes well how Money Forward always try to talk to the public and involve the general citizens. And of course, there are so many other issues. I just cannot mention all of them, but we are so much involved in many government-related affairs related to innovation and finance. And being here is a very important asset for us, not just because we can maybe have influence towards the general public, but also we can foresee the future. And foreseeing the future is always important because user comes first, and we need to know how the users will look like in the year 2030. And we have so many public positions. Again, I cannot mention all of them, but we are in a very fortunate position to be able to both voice out how the technology industry thinks about the innovation, and also maybe mention the early concerns that might derive from the usage of technology. I would just like to close by mentioning 4 large opportunities surrounding public affairs. As I mentioned, from next year, 2023, the tax filing system, the consumption tax regime will be changed by Japan's tax system to employ a system called invoicing. And most of the B2B transactions will be accompanied with the tax invoicing and administration. And so there's a huge once-in-a-generation opportunity to digitalize and transform even the very smallest businesses in Japan. The second point is about tax filing. For the last 2 decades, the Japanese tax authority has introduced electronic book preservation. This is a very important theme because the regulators are at last positioning SaaS and cloud-based tools as a tool to show tax transparency among the taxpayers. The third one will be about the revolution in the payment networks, and non-bank financial companies will be at some point by 2027 involved into the central payment infrastructure, which means that many of the industries that used to needed to be a bank from, let's say, 2027 and year on will not be demanded that kind of a regulatory constraint. And lastly, about digital government, the Japanese government introduced a digital agency last year, and we are in a heavy struggle to penetrate the My Number Card, probably the most important KYC infrastructure in Japan. These will not just transform how citizens communicate to the government, but also change how people access the financial services. And accessing and making that into a more smoother regime is one of the core missions that Money Forward has. And we always mention that these easiness of starting the business, the easiness of starting a new financial transactions will be one of the most important vitamins, we think, about gaining our mission goal. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for joining today. Thank you.